You are listening to GeekFest Rants on the IC Robots Radio Network.
You have located GeekFest Rants, the entertainment podcast for genre geeks like you.
Shall we play a game?
Covering the world of vintage and current film and television since 2010.
Game over, man. Game over.
Featuring in-depth conversations on sci-fi, horror, fantasy, comics, toys, and conventions.
So say we all. So say we all.
And now sit back, relax, and enjoy today's show.
What's your name anyway?
Hey, kid, there's a big shot gangster. He's putting together a crew.
You think everything sounds like a bad idea.
If you come with me, you're in this life for good.
I waited a long time for a shot like this. I got a really good feeling about this.
Hi everybody, and welcome once again to GeekFest Rants. Today, as promised, we are going all Star Wars, and specifically we're doing Solo, a Star Wars story movie review. And this time around, I have my wife and my son helping me put our thoughts together after seeing the film. As usual, we are going to warn you guys, we're going to go spoiler heavy, super spoiler heavy on this one, and we're going to try to examine all the little tidbits, because this film seems to have the most amount of information in it that we've gotten in a long time that connects it to all of the other films we've seen so far. I'll tell you off the bat right now that I was very pleased with the film, but just like before, you know, if you guys remember last time, I had to do multiple shows to kind of get a general consensus of how everybody was feeling about The Last Jedi. Here we have a different, I believe, reaction to it. So let's begin with Solo.
What did I teach you?
You are the Duke of New York. You're a number one.
You will not laugh. You will not cry. You will learn by the numbers. I will teach you.
Can you dig it?
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
That spawn of Satan.
Oh, really?
The Force will be with you, always.
Well, as promised, you know, we couldn't stay away from Star Wars too long as a subject, and I did warn you guys that we were going to hit Solo as soon as it came out. Normally we wait a little longer for most other topics or movies, because we kind of want to let it kind of settle there a little bit and breathe. But this is the type of movie, just like most of the other ones, Star Wars related, that we have to jump on it right away. Joining me today, I have Kyle and Kim, both my son and my wife. My daughter was there too, but she preferred not to jump into this discussion. This is the second of the standalone films. It's unusual because we're developing this pattern now, which maybe it's just coincidence and who the heck knows, but it seems that the more controversy behind the scenes that you have with these films, as opposed to the less controversy and the more positive feelings they seem to have while they're making it, the opposite reaction I seem to at least get on a lot of people as far as the turnout. You know, just like Rogue One, this film had a lot of reshoots take place and rewrites and a whole bunch of stuff that they rather not talk about. You know, it's very hard nowadays to get a behind the scenes detailed, you know, description of what's happening. You know, when we had the Rinsler books, obviously, you know, they came out 30, 40 years later, but they were very detailed. Even though we were still getting a Lucasfilm version of the story, there was a lot of information there that you could kind of gather as to what the problems were in making a lot of these films. But as soon as The Force Awakens came out, and initially they had planned to do an A. Rinsler book about it, they pulled the plug on that right away. Disney said, or somebody said, no, we can't really go into it. Even though I don't believe The Force Awakens had that much drama that was known ahead of time, behind the scenes, other than Harrison Ford breaking his leg. I don't think there was too much. But then, with Rogue One, there was some drama behind the scenes and reshoots, and the trailer looked very different than the final outcome of what the film looked like, and the film ended up being great. The Last Jedi, everybody was gushing over how great it's going and how wonderful the new director is and how they love him so much that they're going to give him a whole new trilogy. And then the movie comes out and it kind of splits the fan base in half. So while that's going on, and even before that's going on, rumors are circulating that the Solo film is in trouble because all of a sudden the directors they hired, Lord and Miller, who used to be from, what was it?
A Lego Movie.
A Lego Movie, and I think 21 Jump Street.
Yeah.
So they have a comedy background, more or less. Rumors started circulating that there was a problem with the shoot, and all of a sudden they get fired. And little by little, we start to hear stories of them being more on the comedic side and them claiming that they wanted a comedy, that, they were hired to shoot a comedy, which doesn't really hit me in that direction. And Lucasfilm saying no, that they wanted a comedic touch to it. So there's a rift between the two. There are stories going around that they would encourage all the actors to improvise their lines, and that Kathleen Kennedy and Kasdan were upset about that because they wanted them to shoot the lines that were written for them. So they got to a point apparently where they would do it both ways. They would shoot it completely ad-libbed, and then they would shoot it completely line by line. And then this way they could kind of keep them happy, but then still shoot it the way they wanted. I believe the editor was also changed at some point because I guess the guy was editing to their style. And they also were not shooting enough coverage, possibly on purpose. This way, when it comes to editing, they can only cut it their way. So whatever the story is, the bottom line with this film is that they ended up getting booted about 3/4 of the way. And they bring in a ringer, or I wouldn't call Ron Howard a ringer, but
I wouldn't either.
Because he does have the chops. You guys remember what his claim to fame was, and let's go over some of those movies. Kim, we were talking about these earlier. What were his older films that are super popular?
Oh, Apollo 13, which I love.
Right.
Willow, which I don't know how many people love, but
No,
I loved it.
I don't think anybody.
I enjoyed
I think it was a bomb, more or less, but it was a Lucasfilm project. And he had, like you said, Apollo 13, Backdraft, Ransom. In the 80s, he had Splash, Cocoon, Gun-Ho. These are comedies, obviously, more light-hearted films. Parenthood, another kind of drama comedy. Far and Away, more of a action-y drama. Ed TV, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, A Beautiful Mind. That was a big one for him.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Which, kind of started a collaboration not only with Russell Crowe, but with Paul Bettany. Then he did a series of Da Vinci Code-based movies that he just wrapped up, kind of recently. Those are all his. Obviously, he didn't write that stuff. That's from a book that's very popular. But then after that, he kind of started doing films that weren't really that popular. I don't want to call them flops, but they definitely were not, top-notch kind of stuff. He did In the Heart of the Sea, which kind of, it's like, okay, next. I think he did also a Beatles documentary recently. So he wasn't exactly, on fire right now. And like I said, I find it difficult to kind of call him a ringer because, he does have experience with Lucasfilm, but it was so long ago that it really barely matters. There's a note in Wikipedia that he was actually offered Phantom Menace and he turned it down, which is like, really? I thought Lucas was going to jump on that from the beginning.
Supposedly he had too much other stuff going on. But, but I think that would have been, I would have liked to see that.
I don't know. And Spielberg, I think, also was offered something with the prequels and he also turned it down. And maybe that's what Lucas said, all right, screw it, I'm doing it all myself. I don't want to mess around with other people. But anyway, so they bring in Ron Howard. He has to now reshoot a majority of the film. He finishes off a couple of weeks of shooting and then progresses to do a 5-week reshoot on top of that. So more or less, this whole film has been reshot one way or the other.
They even had to remove a character, right? Because the guy couldn't do the reshoots.
Right. Well,
they didn't remove the character. They removed
the actor. It was Paul Bettany's character, who's the big baddie here, Dryden Voss. Originally was played by Michael White, if you guys remember him from The Wire and Boardwalk Empire. He's the African-American actor who has this big scar down his face. But apparently he was also supposed to be a motion capture.
Yeah, it was like a lion creature.
Yeah, something weird. So I'm like, he's got a very characteristic face, and he usually plays baddies, but they were going to completely substitute him anyway, so that's unusual. So he couldn't return, and that's how they got Paul Bettany to come in, which I guess might have been the connection with Ron Howard, since he's done a few films with him before. So, the movie also had some rumors going around that, the lead actor, who, again, this is a very difficult role for any actor because they're going to get criticized no matter what, Alden Ehrenreich. There were rumors that he was getting acting coaches to come and help him.
That's what scared me. Like, huh? I was so down on this movie, and I needed this movie to be the best out of all the singles.
Well, we only had 2 so far, so
but all the ones that have come in, all the ones that this is the one that was going to mean the most to me, and I was so disappointed when I was hearing all these rumors. And honestly, I was like, why did they get this guy? He should look younger. I was just totally down on him as playing Han Solo.
Well, then the trailer started coming out little by little, teaser, trailer, that sort of thing. And I started feeling good about it. I had my doubts, and I was, again, with my theory of, after Last Jedi, which was a very big disappointment for me, and this could have been the follow-up that completely could sink this franchise, because they are very frequent now. People are talking about Star Wars fatigue and are just like Marvel fatigue. Are we getting too many, too fast? Could this be another super crazy creative Last Jedi type of turn? Now, the thing that works in this film, as far as I'm concerned, is that it does have a comedic touch. I understand that, and I get it. And I think it works for this film because it is a standalone kind of film. The thing that, again, and I keep thinking, this is what happened with Thor. Thor went from a pretty serious, fantastical film to the third one being more or less a comedic film. And it works. Where it shouldn't work, it works. Here, you have the same scenario. These are Star Wars films, but these are Star Wars films that can afford something different because they're not necessarily tied to a trilogy that's surrounding them and feeding off of them. The Last Jedi, again, because we're coming off Force Awakens, I had too many problems with because of that. But for a standalone film, I can see that. And I can also see how the problems with the directors probably wanted to go more comedic.
It would have been way too much. This was a nice balance.
Right. And that's the thing that I also complained in The Last Jedi was that I get the humor and I understand that there is some humor that works for a typical trilogy, but then you go overboard with the humor and it feels weird. Here they kind of put the brake on it at a certain point and they throw you the jokes, and don't get me wrong, this thing is full of all kinds of jokey, funny material. But wow, what a difference it would have made if they would have gone even a little farther with it. Let's go over the actual story because we're dealing with, I guess, this is an origin story, I guess, if you want to call it, similar to Marvel. Let's see. Han is running scams in Corellia, and he has a kind of like a girlfriend, and they're trying to buy their way out.
What do you mean, kind of like a girlfriend? That was his girlfriend.
Well,
they were in love. They were going to run away and escape together. He obviously didn't know her
that well.
Oh, he did.
No, because my theory is that she didn't change. I think she might have been using him from the beginning just to get through this portion of her life.
Oh, I didn't get that.
So they're running some kind of scam where they're going to hopefully pay off somebody and they're going to sneak away and something like that. And in the process of getting away, she is not able to get away, but he is. But he unfortunately has to join the Empire in order to be able to get away as a recruit, because he wants to learn how to fly or whatever, but ends up being basically just a foot soldier. And he wants to get out of that, and then he hooks up with some criminal guys that are running bigger scams, bigger missions that they're trying to, score. This is all for
smuggling.
Money. This is not
smuggling.
Yeah, they're smugglers. They're criminals, which is the whole background of the whole Solo storyline. So we go through an entire mission that it seems to be going pretty well, and he kind of is able to manage his way into it, and he even befriends Chewbacca in the process. And
that was adorable.
Yeah, they do a slightly different take on what we all thought the exact canon was. And then at the last second, the mission falls apart because another gang gets in the way and the shipment is lost. And now all of a sudden they owe the big boss a lot of money because they lost this shipment that they stole. So we end up getting a secondary mission. And this is where they hook up with Lando because they need a fast ship. And that's the way that Lando works his way into the story, and they meet each other. And that gets you to basically the second half of the film where you have another mission. And overall, and especially towards the middle and later end of the film starts to turn into more of a Western. You get the feel of the whole Western motif, the locations, the actions, how you set up your characters, the double crossing that takes place left and right, all the way up to the end where in a typical Western, the bad guy, the Clint Eastwood type of character, sides with the peasants, whatever treasure it is that they stole, he turns it over to the peasants, where here you have a similar situation where they're going to give this loot, this fuel really, because it's worth so many credits, over to the peasants that are, in a way, you thought there were other criminals there, but they end up being the beginning of the rebellion also, a different branch of the rebellion. And that kind of splits him with just about everybody else that he's involved with, other than Chewbacca and to a certain extent Lando. His so-called girlfriend, tries to double cross him. The boss tries to double cross him. His mentor double crosses. Everybody double crosses everybody at this point, and that's where we end up with at the end of the film. So let's start talking about a little bit of not necessarily specific Easter eggs, but different things that are happening in the movie. As usual, we're going to go spoiler heavy here. We always do. But let's start off with the big surprise cameo, if you want to call it. Kyle, why don't you tell us who we see at the end of the film, which is the person behind, it's the bad guy behind the bad guy behind the bad guy scenario.
Darth Maul.
Now, how does he play a role in this?
From where we remember, basically, he did survive Phantom Menace.
Why?
And
How?
His ability with the dark side of the Force was so strong that because of his anger with Kenobi, basically just drove him to survive all that time.
But where do we see this? Where can people find this information? Because it's not in the films.
In the Clone Wars is when they first bring him back. Yeah, so you watch the Clone Wars, and then he shows up again in Rebels too. But eventually he gets killed by Obi-Wan Kenobi. But in between that time, the Clone Wars, he starts building this criminal empire with all these different guilds, and he loses it, but then he starts getting it back again. And at this point in Solo, he's in control of, he's the silent leader of Crimson Dawn. Nobody really knows except for apparently Dryden and Kira.
Yeah.
And now, Dryden was the original figurehead of Crimson Dawn, but Maul was always the leader. And everybody just Voss is the leader, I guess, because they didn't know about Maul. And now Kira is in charge now, and Maul says that, and he tells her to go back to Dathomir to meet him. So I guess that's where his base of operations is. And we do see it in Rebels a little bit. It's just this cave, basically. But it's very interesting that I was not expecting them to put Darth Maul in here.
Yeah, I thought that at the end we were going to get a more traditional Star Wars villain. Let's say, for example, a Jabba, or even an Emperor.
Yeah.
Somebody that's usually behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But what surprises me the most about this is that I was always under the impression that Disney wanted to get away from the prequels or the non-OT material as much as possible, because they wanted people to focus on the original trilogies to tie them specifically to the new movies, to the new trilogies. But the fact that they are going to throw Darth Maul here says to me that maybe not. Maybe they do want to capitalize on all this material that's been put out, especially with Rebels and Clone Wars.
Yeah.
They need to. If Disney is smart, and there are times I question whether they understand the fan base as well as they should. Lucasfilm understood it. It's why they gave everybody, not everybody, but they gave people rights to use material and stuff, people like podcasts and shows, because they understood that the fans were their lifeblood. And Disney knows this, but I don't know if they understand the complete psychology of the true Star Wars fan.
That's the marketing element of Lucasfilm.
But what I'm saying is maybe they realized that they can't just keep Darth Maul or the prequels completely out of the picture, because while there are people that, the prequels are a big conflict. So there are people that like them, people that love them, people that hate them, but they need to keep some form of canon. Even though they ditched it, they have to cater to hardcore fans that know the history.
Well, even Lucas, I remember clearly that, he would, whenever he would have any criticisms of why did you do this or why did you do that, it would always come back to, well, it's my story. I do whatever I want. I made them for myself, not for the fans.
Which is fine.
Which is true, and that's the way he did it. However, with that said, there's always the Boba Fett was wasted argument that chased Lucas forever, where he was then able to bring him back as the father of Boba Fett with Jango Fett, so kind of make up for it a little bit.
Yeah, and then in the Clone Wars, they brought Boba Fett back.
Yeah, they brought them both back in.
They showed how he progressed.
Right. And also he had the same problem with Darth Maul, because people said, again, you introduced this really cool character, and after 10 minutes of fighting, that's theoretically the end we see of him, but they did bring him, through the back door with Clone Wars and Rebels to give you more of that character that people seem to be very curious about. So it's kind of like a two-handed scenario here, where on one hand you're saying I'm sticking to my guns, but on the other hand you're saying there's money to be made here. We better do something about it and give people something to chew on.
The fact that they did Darth Maul just opens up so many doors for just other cameos.
Not only the cameos, but it reinforces the entire Clone Wars series, and it really throws all that into the. I know that they were considering it to be canon to a certain extent, and when Lucas was in charge, he had these different levels of canon, and you had the films, and then you had the TV shows. There were tiers, but now by throwing that character in, you're on an equal footing, pretty much.
Clone Wars was always canon, but obviously a lot of the comics and stuff all the comics pretty much before. Fun fact: all the comics before the Disney purchase, except for the Darth Maul Dathomir comic, was considered not canon anymore. But the Darth Maul Dathomir comic, which takes place right after we last see him in Clone Wars, that was still canon. And they repackaged it as a Marvel comic too to help enforce that it's still canon.
Well, what you're doing at this point now is you're forcing film viewers to engage in what I would consider to be EU-ish kind of material now. You're forcing people to go in that direction a little bit.
And I think that the way that they did that, I think, is going to help. But, there's other factors with other issues that are going to attract
it'd be interesting if this is going to go somewhere. In other words, was this just a bone that they threw at the super fans to kind of, give them a rattle? Or is this something that will lead somewhere where you will encounter, granted, there's a good chance, we've been hearing the reports. We have a Boba Fett movie most likely coming.
Yeah.
We have an Obi-Wan movie. Is it possible that these characters will kind of work their way into these other future films? Not necessarily as the stars, but as little background characters that will pop in and out. Remember, Edrich has a 3-picture deal here that could go in either direction. He could have a pretty big role, which we probably won't, but he can just be a guest star on these films like they do with the MCU, with Tony Stark showing up. But
you also
Spider-Man.
have to remember, though, Felicity Jones also had a 2-picture deal, but obviously she got taken out.
But she could show up.
She could still show up if they do something. Yeah.
They could, in either one of these.
She's alive during Solo.
Yeah,
because this takes place 10 years before Rogue One.
There could be a prison scene, and she's in prison or something, or
well,
something.
she'd be like 15 in this.
Can I just say something about, I would love to see Alden come up in some of these other movies, and I can't believe that I'm saying that, because how I was. I was down. Even when the trailers were out, I thought the film itself was looking good. I was happy to see that it looked good, but I still wasn't happy with his dialogue, the tiny little snippets that we got. So I was about, 2 weeks before the movie came out. I was reading I follow, if anyone knows Savannah Kiefer, the Dorky Diva. She has a podcast. She has a blog. Huge Han Solo fan, as I am. And she was at the premiere. And she was not too thrilled with Episode 8. So, she doesn't just love everything Star Wars that comes her way. When she said that she loved this film and she gave so much props to it, I knew it was going to be okay. I trusted it. And oh my gosh, she was right. It was fantastic. So I formally take back everything bad I've said about the actors, the everything.
Well, let's dig a little into the characters, as I continue to go through this list of specific things. Let's start with Han Solo. What do we think of him? I mean, you just told us exactly what you think. What did you think?
Yeah, I thought he was great, honestly. Like I feel like and I know you did too, Mom, but in the trailers they kind of showed his weakest lines, and I'm sure some of them were like alternate takes.
They must have.
So it wasn't it's still like it was getting better for me, but it still felt weird. But like after like 5 minutes into the movie, I immediately took him in as Han Solo.
He really portrayed well, especially in those beginning scenes. The, I guess, young boy. I still don't quite understand how old he's supposed to be at that point, but I suggest 25. Late teens, early 20s.
Well, he's supposed to be. I'm trying to think because he's 35 in A New Hope.
Yeah, this is about 10 years
and
before.
The major part of the movie is about 10 years before. So yeah, he's 25.
A young guy struggling to live, struggling to stay alive, struggling against the circumstances he's under. I really enjoyed watching his naive ways being stripped away throughout the film, and I think that was portrayed quite well.
Yeah, I enjoyed it too. I mean, I remember you, for example, telling me, that there are other actors out there that they could do great impressions of Han Solo, and it's Han Solo. And I think not only in the Solo character, but in the Lando character, there are times where an actor can do a little taste of a line or an inflection of how you say a word or something like that captures that imitation. But you can't do 100% imitation, because then it's like comedians doing Shatner impressions. It's funny, but it's distractingly funny and unusual to watch just 100% impression from beginning to end. You never get to know the character. You're only channeling somebody who's not there in front of you, and it's distracting. So I see why it doesn't work that way. I think he did it pretty well. I would even give more credit to Lando as him doing an even better impression without it being an impression. Maybe it's the costume, maybe it's the lines, but with Han, he has to be laid back, he has to be calm, he has to be reckless and always looking for the next scam in this film. Granted, by the time we get to Star Wars, he's a little more calm about it. He's a little more in control. Here he's a little wilder, and like you said, he is more idealistic, and he's going to do these things, and he has these plans. By the time we get to Star Wars, he's just plugging holes because he owes this guy money, and he's got to get this because he's got to get that done. His life is practically over in terms of planning. He's just doing damage control by the time we meet him in Star Wars.
And I was talking to somebody the other day. It was that waiter, right? He was saying, I think that he talked. I really liked him, but I think he talked a little fast. Han Solo talks a little slower, and I'm thinking, no, that's maturity. That's the man's a bit tired by A New Hope. He's more mature. He's more cool and calculated with what he says and with what he does.
Right, and he's younger. He's more of a professional now.
Yeah.
His job is to be a criminal. That's his job. He's a pirate. He's all those things that he's not yet at this point. He's like a young guy trying to join a gang, and he's trying to impress everyone with all the BS he can come up with in this movie.
And it can't be easy for him because, as Kira said in the movie, his real nature is good. It's goodness.
And I still think, and
this is why I love him.
Like I said before, I still think that I don't think she just changed in those 3 years. Her personality completely changed. I think she was, in a way, using him more or less in the beginning. Granted, they were maybe boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever you want to call it, but it just intensified as things got worse. So she became more of what she already was.
I think in the film, I think after the 3 years had gone by, I think everything she did, I think she had something in her heart for him, but I think from the time they reunited to the end, she always knew how it would end, how she would, everything was very calculated for her. But I really thought that in the very beginning of the film that they were this couple in love.
More of a blank slate?
I didn't get that. I just think too much changed for her in 3 years. While he was struggling just to get back to her during that time, she was just struggling probably to stay alive. And I guess that can change a person, I would think.
Now, what did we think of Lando?
I thought he was probably the best portrayed, honestly, out of everybody. Donald Glover did an amazing job.
I think he did a really amazing job because the truth is I hate Lando Calrissian. I always have, and I still do. So he did a really good job.
Again, yeah, I agree with both of you. As far as who did the best job with their character, yeah, I think it is him because he gives them so much more of that slimy used car salesman feel to he's constantly cheating. He's constantly, but it's like he has the bare amount enough to be a good guy, just barely to that point. And also, with Lando, there's a lot of props in terms of the way he dresses, the way he keeps the Falcon. There were so many things in the Falcon that are so Lando-ish.
Oh, who didn't want to try on all those capes?
Well,
I did.
There's a lot of capes, and obviously they make fun of it, as they should, because he was the first guy, I think, to wear all these capes in the movies. But, again, he did a great job. And the way that they figured out the cheating, the fact that it wasn't just one game. We watch the trailers and you think, okay, boom, there's the game, there he wins. No, he doesn't win the Falcon until all the way in the end, where he kind of reverses the cheating that Lando did to him in the first place in order to win it this time around. Plus, we also got that insight between Lando and his robot that I know some people are freaking out about, and how that robot is also incorporated now into the actual Falcon.
That's cool.
We're going to hit that too. Now, let's talk about there's nothing really to say about Chewbacca. Chewbacca is Chewbacca no matter how you slice it. The canon of Chewbacca is pretty much, I would say, 75% there. He meets Han Solo, and Han Solo frees him from some kind of enslavement. Originally, we thought something about him being enslaved, and he owes Han a life debt, and he leaves his family to go with Han because of this debt. But that was all, I don't know, EU canon or something.
We don't see Lumpy and Stumpy or whatever. But and they don't mention the life debt. I mean, right. Maybe they'll mention it later, or Chewie mentions it, but we don't know because there's no subtitles sometimes.
Yeah, who knows? I don't know.
But
we do get a scene where he frees a whole bunch of other Wookiees. But in Clone Wars, don't we get Ahsoka freeing Chewbacca also from another imprisonment?
This is obviously
Trandoshians or something.
Obviously before Episode 3, but yeah, Chewbacca gets stuck with as a slave and Trandoshians. But also we see in Rebels they go to Kessel. Obviously this is maybe 5 years after this movie, but they go to Kessel and they free a bunch of Wookiees at Kessel. But Chewbacca's not there.
Right, but you do get a little bit of that. And like I said, he does get to rescue other Wookiees that are being enslaved. So you kind of get the background of that. Now, let's talk a little bit about the bad guy / questionables. We talked about Emilia Clarke's character, Kira, how she's questionable. What about Woody Harrelson's character, Beckett, which is the Han Solo's mentor, that tells them outright that sooner or later everybody's going to betray you. Obviously, even himself, he's going to betray. So you have to walk into this movie knowing that everybody can just completely betray everybody.
He makes me incredibly uncomfortable with that, which I think was the point.
And it takes a while for him to accept them because he turns them down and beats them a couple of times before, while he was in the military. Because he's kind of like he is military, but he's pretending to be military. He stole a uniform or something.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think that he's just you always had in the back of your mind he's gonna do something, he's gonna turn on him, but then there's these scenes where he's kind of talking to him almost like with fatherly advice. So the dichotomy of that fatherly figure, and yet you had a feeling that he was going to betray him, and then he did anyway, he's just very uncomfortable.
And his gang, you have a couple of interesting characters. You have the girl that is kind of like his girlfriend, which we don't really find out too much about her. She's like another badass gang member of that crew that eventually, she's out of the picture fast.
He did seem to be affected by her death, though.
Yeah, and he definitely apparently had plans, future plans, those two together, but it's almost kind of like it's part of the business, you got to move on.
And after that, he probably really just didn't care anymore.
But there was another guy played by Jon Favreau, right? His voice, and was it mocap? I don't know if it was mocap.
Yeah, it was a little mocap, yeah.
He was a cute little character, a four-armed character who always saying like interesting, funny things.
He was basically Rocket Raccoon.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's what I kind of thought.
Now let's talk about Paul Bettany's character. He's like, he's the bad guy behind the crew, let's say. He's the middle bad guy, but he's kind of the biggie in this film, the one we talked about earlier that was replaced by a different actor. He's like the rich gangster, let's say. We get the scenes where he visits his lair and he's got all his luxurious items and he's making the next deal that they're going to do, and they failed at the first one, but now they propose a second deal, to go steal all that fuel that they lost in the first one. He was all right. He had this thing where well, again, unusual. Originally, this was supposed to be a CGI character, but now when they introduced the new actor, they said, screw the CGI, let's just do it with his face. But they gave him like these weird scars that I could have sworn whenever he would get enraged, they would turn red.
I didn't notice that. I think maybe it's because anytime he was like really angry, he had those knives. And
those are like lightsaber knives or something. It's weird how they did those things.
But I honestly, I think that those scars might have something to do with Darth Maul, maybe, and we'll get like a tie-in comic or something, maybe, or something. I don't know, but
he's eerie. He's just eerie and unabashedly unapologetic over how he goes from one moment being, are you okay? How you doing? And straight into, if you don't do what I need you to do, you're dead. It's very creepy. It's so
like
blatant.
A high-end gangster thing where they can be completely civil and
I've always found that creepy though.
And high class, but then they throw the psychotic in between sentences.
Yes.
That
has always creeped me out. In everything like that.
Now, let me hit a couple of things here because I definitely want to talk about this. There's so many callbacks in this film to everything, just about everything Star Wars that's ever been done before. I almost feel like this film was done in the opposite manner that most of the other Lucas directed films were done, in terms of they gave the fans so many shout outs to just about so many aspects of canon and almost canon stuff. For example, the disguise that they wear when they infiltrate the mining colony. Beckett's disguise is Lando's disguise from Jedi.
How
it's
great
his
was
helmet.
that?
It's part of the chest plate. So I guess it's part of that thing is just living in the Falcon waiting to be used. In Drayden Voss's office, few people have pointed out, and I did see some of this, not all of it. There's lots of Easter eggs in there. Apparently you have from the Indiana Jones films, the fertility idol, the stones from Temple of Doom, the Holy Grail from Last Crusade. There is a giant crystal skull that you could say is from Crystal Skull, or it's from the cover of the Han Solo novels, the old original Han Solo novels. So there's plenty of stuff like that. Did you guys notice any of those?
I didn't.
I mean, I noticed the skull. But,
he was, I was kind of fixated on him during those scenes because he really creeped me out.
It is kind of distracting in a way for the super fans, I think, because... And this happens to me every time I watch a Star Wars movie now, is I am picking at the details and I'm not concentrating too much on the story or the lines because I am like hunting for stuff, for information. I don't want to miss anything. And unfortunately, this is the type of thing you got to watch a few times because either you miss something from the movie or you miss something that was in the background. You also have in the office a Mandalorian armor that at first people were thinking it's a Boba Fett cameo, but it wasn't.
No, yeah. I think it's more of like an ancient Mandalorian one because it looks like the helmet looks similar to like the ones that we've seen in Rebels.
They were red.
Yeah, but the body armor itself is like more like a samurai rather than like than the Mandalorian armor we've seen before. So I think it's a pretty old edition of the armor.
There's also a character in there that shows up that I remember seeing in a visual dictionary for Rogue One, and Kyle said that you actually saw it in the background. It's these people that have kind of like half the head, and according to the mythology is that it's Dr. Ebizan whose experiment, that's his claim to fame. That's why he's a criminal. He experiments because he takes like slaves and removes half their cranium in order to make them more subservient to whoever it is that owns them. Yeah. And they do this weird effect where I guess they must do like a green or a blue cap, and you literally are missing half that person's head, which is really creepy looking. Yeah. Well, there is a character like that in his office. Let's see. When Chewbacca is playing with Beckett, the holochess, there is apparently more creatures, more characters than there was in New Hope.
I thought so.
And the reason was that the real reason is because historically, when they built the holochess thing, they had, I believe they said they had 12 creatures, that they were going to animate in stop motion. But Lucas, for some reason, said, you know what, only give me 10. So there were 2 creatures that were never used. Those 2 creatures, they called them Bulbous and Scrim. They gave them actual names to them. Well, when they were kind of ramping things up to do it all over again, they realized they found these extra creatures, and they realized they forgot to put them, they couldn't put them in the first time. So they actually have them now in the holochess, and when Chewbacca gets angry and bangs on the table, those 2 little creatures disappear. So that means that he broke the game, thereby not getting those extra creatures down the line.
This is the stuff that the hardcore fans need. This is catered to us. Of all ages, the hardcore fans.
And it's the type of thing that, yes, Lucas probably wouldn't have bothered with because it was an artistic decision in this first place not to include those creatures, but to throw it here, it kind of helps. Clint Howard, who's Ron Howard's brother, always gets a cameo. He got one here. He's one of the robot fighting slave masters or something. Yeah. And he gets beat up during that thing. Bosk is mentioned as a possible hire. Yeah. So that's interesting, and I actually read something about that. If they do any sort of continuation, they want to bring Bosk on as a character at some point.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Because they were saying, like, he's trying to convince them to hire them, and she's like, why don't we hire Bosk? He's much better.
I hope that, like, when they do that Boba Fett movie, I hope it's another heist movie, but they have Boba Fett teaming up with these other bounty hunters, and Han Solo is in there too with Chewbacca.
You can give him a small role, and he can have a small role. There's no problem. The famous "I love you, I know" line gets a weird twist here because by the end of the movie, Lando says to Han, I hate you, and he says, I know, which everybody understood what the twist there was. There was a correction in the movie itself that it seems to be happening since Empire came out, and that is Lando keeps referring to Han as Han.
That was great.
And he does it on purpose just to piss him off. And Han says, no, it's actually Han. Yeah. And it's like you can tell those
keeps going with it.
Yeah, they're just messing with each other. At the end, when are actually playing for the Falcon this time, for real, and Han wins, this is when he hugs Lando the same way that Lando hugs him at Empire when they first meet him. Yeah. Yep. And the thing that takes place at that point is that Han actually removes, I guess, that card that he's got that device under his sleeve so he couldn't cheat, so then he could cheat against him, and that's how that takes place.
Yeah, well, in Empire, they're exchanging that hug again, and even though something wasn't literally, Lando didn't take something from Han, he knew all along. He had Vader waiting in the wings.
Well, he had something up his sleeve.
So yeah, I hate Lando Calrissian.
There's tons of musical cues here that are throwbacks, obviously, to the original trilogy, the John Williams score. Granted, this wasn't John Williams, this was John Powell, which, again, to tell you the truth, I have not had a memorable Star Wars score in a long time. I mean, I couldn't tell you an original cut from this movie, music-wise. I couldn't tell you an original one from Last Jedi. I couldn't tell you an original one from Rogue One. From Force Awakens, there's Rey's theme, which was written by John Williams. The whole soundtrack is John Williams.
And then the First Order and Resistance themes, I think.
But these latest ones, I couldn't tell you. I could only pick out the classic stuff when they would pop in. But it was done in a very weird way that I really don't enjoy, and that is they have regular music, and then all of a sudden in the middle of whatever regular music, original new music, they throw you a couple of beats of a more recognized theme. And it's kind of like, I understand they're trying to make us think of that, but it's just abrupt. It's kind of like holding a flag saying, look over here, look over here. I don't like that.
I could see that where it would be abrupt, but I can tell you that one of the highlights for me was when Han and Chewie were suddenly in the seats of the Millennium Falcon together for the first time, and they had the Star Wars, the original theme going through. That I appreciated very much. And
we heard the Imperial March as part of the recruiting video they were showing.
Yeah.
In that recruiting video, by the way, we get to see the ship that is the Cantwell ship that I've been talking about in the past, and I'm going to have a show about it very soon, that was reduced. Apparently, it was supposed to have a bigger scene, I guess, but it was reduced basically to a hologram of this old conceptual ship.
Yeah, and that Imperial March thing, it's actually the same. It's meant to be more of a march.
It's a recruitment
and it's the same. It's the same song that they use in Rebels during one of the parades.
That's right. I do remember they did that.
It's the same one.
I did hear the asteroid chase music during some of the flying sequences, the TIE fighter attack sequences.
Yeah.
We also heard a little bit of Duel of Fates when we saw Maul at the end.
Yeah.
So they do throw those. Yeah, they do throw those left and right. Scarif is mentioned as a planet that they don't want to go to because it's too difficult to steal from.
Yeah.
So that's interesting because that's a Rogue One reference. Beckett mentions that he killed Aura Singh. Now, why don't you tell us what that's all about?
Yeah, Aura Singh is a bounty hunter. You see her briefly in episode 1, just like looking at the pod race.
But she's really more from...
Yeah, and then in Clone Wars, though, you see her like actively like being a bounty hunter.
She's been in a couple of episodes.
And she was like a mentor for Boba Fett at one point, and she's fought like Ahsoka and Anakin and them. And then now I found out her fate, basically, that Beckett kills her.
Or at least he thinks he did. Who knows?
Something like that. And then Beckett mentions that when he like retires, he wants to go to Gliansum, which is actually the planet that Kit Fisto's race is from.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. There is an eventual duel between Han and Beckett. And the way that the duel is staged is that Han already has a blaster in his hand, and he's surprising Beckett. And Beckett does not have a blaster in his hand. He has it in his holster. So as they're kind of talking to each other, you know it's coming. There's a duel coming between these two. Mm-hmm. And then as Beckett reaches for his blaster, and the camera stays with Beckett, we see him get shot 2 times in the chest or 1 time in the chest, something like that. We never see Han shooting, but we do get the impression here that obviously Han is shooting first before the other guy even gets a chance to get a shot at him. And that is a very diplomatic, I guess, way of letting everybody know that Han will always shoot first no matter what. Which is kind of, I guess it's a subtle, sorry, George. Yeah. We understand that you mean well, but we're still sticking to the original.
Yeah. Well, the man sold. I had his back for everything he did before he sold because it was his baby, but he sold.
Yeah.
So all bets are off.
As we learn in A New Hope, Chewie does tend to rip people's arms out of their sockets, and in one of the fights, he actually does it. He ends up, and he's holding these 2 arms. He doesn't know what to do with them. He's like, "What happened?" Yeah. There is a mention from Lando when they're first, I guess, approaching or about to go to the mining colony. He's like, "Oh, I hate mining colonies," which is very ironic because later on he's going to be running a mining colony.
Yeah. And you actually apparently you can see a little model of Cloud City in
the ship. Falcon. Apparently, not only the Cloud City, but there is a tiny Falcon. They say there too, which is, I guess it's supposed to be a background decoration that is not supposed to be that because obviously you're not supposed to be able to see it.
That's a little silly.
But it's kind of like, I guess it was a super hidden Easter egg. Yeah. Kira's character apparently is supposed to know this fighting technique called Teras Kasi.
Yeah, it's from the
martial art.
Yeah, there's a PlayStation game. It's like a Star Wars fighting game that came out in 2001 or so. 2002.
It's a bone thrown in that direction. But apparently, it's also the fighting style of the Praetorian Guards in Last Jedi.
Oh, really? I didn't know
That's another one they're saying. So it's
I liked it.
So it's that's interesting.
Despite the fact that I don't like her very much, I did like that.
Warwick Davis, once again, has a cameo like he does in everyone. This time around, he actually has a couple of lines, but what's ironic or interesting is the fact that he's playing the same character, right?
Yeah, from episode 1, he's spectating the pod race.
Right, he was like in this, I think he might have been in the same booth that either Jabba or Gartula the Hutt, one of those two were in.
I think so.
We also see tooth tubes from Rogue One, at least one of those brothers or something, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think maybe that this is him like getting to that point where he's going to work for Saw Gerrera eventually because he's already in a rebellion,
Now, I'm I'm still looking.
We have to see it again.
Yeah, but I'm still looking, and I'm trying to find pictures, and I know it's too early. People haven't gone frame by frame. I could have swore I saw a background character around that gang that looked a lot like Saw Gerrera. He was an African-American guy. He had the fro, and he had the mustache, and he had a lot of gear on his body.
Yeah,
but he was in the background.
I don't think that it would have been him, because otherwise it would have. First of all, it would have been Forrest Whitaker, because like that scene takes place around the same time as the original flashback scene from Rogue One at the beginning, you know. So I feel like if it was him, he would have been there, number one, and number two, he would have been like in charge.
Well, that's the thing that's the best argument that I could hear, is that he would have been in charge, maybe. Yeah. But I wouldn't be surprised if they do have him as a background character, and they obviously you can't afford to get him because he's too expensive just for a cameo purposes. But you could have a lookalike in the background, slightly out of focus.
Yeah, I don't think
just so it's technically there. We'll see. I mean, we're going to find out more stuff as the weeks go along now, of stuff that we haven't even noticed yet, but I'm sure we're going to get a lot more. Speaking of cameos, Anthony Daniels apparently had a cameo,
and I missed that.
I missed it too. Originally, people were thinking he was going to play, obviously, C-3PO, because that's what he always does, but no, it's not C-3PO. Then they thought that maybe he's going to play a Wookiee, because this way he can be with Chewbacca and some shit. No, it's not a Wookiee. He apparently plays one of those prisoners in the mine. It's a humanish prisoner that is talking to the other Wookiees to kind of encourage them to rebel, just like the other ones are rebelling. When everything starts to go crazy, he's one of the ones that is part of that gang, apparently. We did mention Jon Favreau plays Rio Durant, that four-armed guy, which was a sweet little character that has a pretty bad death that we kind of unusually care about. It was a sad death. Yeah,
he was a cool dude. Yeah,
and he does mention something about how, if when he gets back home, or you should try Minok stew or something like that.
Yeah.
Which again, it's a throwback to Empire. During the time where Han is joining the Empire, he doesn't seem to have a last name that at least he's willing to give. And the recruiter kind of, he's like, oh, you're by yourself? Well, you'll be Han Solo. We'll call you Han Solo. It's like, okay, fine. That's kind of like it's your traditional Ellis Island story of, Giuseppe, what's-his-face, comes in, and they can't pronounce his last name, so they're like, okay, you're Giuseppe Queens. Here you go. Congratulations, Giuseppe Queens. The whole issue of the parsecs, the 12 parsecs, well, we kind of knew a little bit of this before, that parsecs is not a time.
But that's old news.
It's not a time frame, it's a distance frame. And the trick to this is that it would traditionally take, from what I've been reading, something like 18 to 20 parsecs to make it out. But because he ends up taking that shortcut by triggering all these other impossible things to happen, he's able to do it in a lot distance. And it's also even questionable if it's 12, because at the end he says, I round down to 12. So it probably wasn't even 12. It's probably a little more than that, but there's a little game going on there with that. Yeah. The droid that Lando has, which again is a little questionable in terms of some people are having, they're getting their panties in a bunch. They did something different with this droid, and this is something that they haven't done yet with droids. And this is something that, amusingly enough, I was talking to a friend of mine on the phone the other day. We did a show a long time ago, a GeekFest Rants show, about droids. We did like an hour or two just about droids. And the subject of slavery and droids came up in our conversation, and that the fact that droids do seem to be, in the Star Wars universe, as far as back as Lucas, they seem to be a second-class tier kind of citizens where they're only there to serve. They're not even allowed to come in the bar with you. Yeah. Then people have bad feel. Like even Han Solo, he's like, he hates them. He just despises droids. So there's this ongoing thing going on with droids. Here, they took this particular droid, and it was voiced by an actress, and it was very boisterous in terms of it wanting almost like independence and droid rights, if you will. So there's a little social context taking place here. They invade this mining colony, and all of a sudden this droid's like, okay, well, I'm going to start freeing these droids now. And he starts talking all of them, and they start going crazy. And I love the gonk droids that because they're forcing them to fight like a gladiator pit type of thing with droids.
Well, no, that was a different part of the movie.
Wasn't that in the where they were stealing the gasoline, the fuel?
No, that was when they met Lando. Yeah, that was
when they first met Lando. He was in that place, that I guess cantina style.
Well, the droid is called LEET, And the reason they named it that, the funny reason, is because it's a reference to an alphabet that has to do with the internet, where you take letters and numbers and form words. It's called the Leet alphabet. So if you guys want to look that up, you can do that. But that's the whole.
I've heard of that. I think I've heard of that.
Yeah, where you can take numbers and form words and letters, and it's kind of like a license plates, where you take these and you can form these words out of combination of numbers and letters. But this is a droid that it's a little different, because at one point they're talking about how, the droid has a moment with Kira where they're talking about men, for example, and they're saying, he's cute. I know you've been watching him, and I can tell you're interested in Han and whatever. And then she's like, what about you and Lando? And she's like, oh, well, they start to talk about how she does seem to have some sort of relationship with Lando.
But she's saying it's all him. But she doesn't sound like. But she sounds like she likes him, but she's not going to admit it.
Right, but it's a little weird at one point, and then later in the film she gets hurt and she gets killed, and Lando freaks out. He practically breaks down, and he has to carry whatever's left of the body of the robot in the ship, and they have to help him out because it's almost like he can't even move his body himself.
I actually did feel a little bad for Lando at that point. I'm not totally callous.
The other gang that ruins the initial plans of stealing all that fuel that then shows up a second time, the leader of the gang is called Enfy's Nest, and the rest of the gang they're referred to as the Cloud Riders. That's a name that's been used before, I think in comics or something. It comes from somewhere.
Yeah, it's from the old Marvel comics. It was like
and the twist with that gang is that by the end of the film they encounter them again, and they're about to steal everything again from them. And we then find out that no, this gang is apparently what could be considered the beginning of a rebel cell.
Yeah.
They're about, they're trying to fight for the rights of the people that are being robbed left and right. They don't really mention the Empire that much.
No, because
it's more about everybody stealing from each other, all the gangsters and the pirates. Yeah. So this person takes off the helmet, and you're expecting like some kind of weird, disgusting creature to come out, and it's a girl, and it's like, wait a minute, what the hell is this? So that's a pretty big surprise to have that happened, at the last minute. And again, that's more like the traditional Western where that's when Han decides, oh, crap, I guess I got to help these people now because it's the right thing to do. Again, going back to the whole thing about him not wanting to do the right thing, but he can't help it sometimes.
Because he's good. Deep down, in his heart, he's good.
The planet where they're fighting with the army when he's training as a foot soldier, it's Minban, which is also from Splinter of the Mind's Eye. Another throwback, to the earlier stuff. The gangster that we see in the beginning, that's kind of like a caterpillar-looking thing coming out of the water. The voice is by Linda Hunt, who you might be more familiar with her. I think she was in NCIS, The Year of Living Dangerously, a long time ago. So she's, I guess she's a voice actress now, also as far as we know. When Han is challenging Lando for his first card game, he puts up his ship that he doesn't own and doesn't even have. And the model of that ship is interesting because it brings us to Rebels, right, Kyle?
Yes, they mentioned, what was it, the YT freighter?
Something like that.
Yeah, that's the same model as the Ghost.
So, not that he's aware of the Ghost, but I guess that's a known model of ship, which is a derivative, I think, of the Falcon.
Yeah.
It's another
it came
model.
Before, yeah.
Yeah. There's another cameo of a character that maybe, Kyle, you can help me with, because I'm not very familiar with it, called Tam Posla. And he's apparently one that showed up in Rogue One and is in the Dr. Alpha comics.
Oh, the
with
blue,
the helmet.
With the blue helmet. Yeah, he was in the background in the first Lando Gamble thing, yeah.
So there's just about a ton of... And this is only from the first... this is only after seeing the film 2 days ago. All the information that's out there now of all these connections that are just about all over the place. What about those whales, Kyle? Because I could have swore those whales are part of something having to do with...
Okay, so first of all, we don't see those whales in the movie.
Now, hold on. Let's let people know what we're talking about. When they're doing the Kessel Run, as part of the shortcut, they enter the section that is unsafe, and in that unsafe section you have like all these almost like black holes that are opening up, and these kind of like octopus whale things with spikes and teeth.
It's not
Are those the same that we saw on Rebels?
No, it's not. It's a completely different creature, but it has the same like feeding process where
they eat the fuel.
There's creatures that they'll live in these gas clouds and they'll eat things. Like in Clone Wars they had these from Camino, those little winged creatures.
Yes.
Yeah, they have things like bigger versions of those that hide in nebulas and they eat the
we've seen those. We've seen those too.
But yeah, it's the same feeding process, but it's not the same creature. Definitely not.
Well, speaking of creatures that are winged creatures, when we were looking at the capes in Lando's cape room, if you will, there was one cape that kind of stuck out, and it would look like a Hawaiian shirt. And then later in the film is what he's wearing. Well, I found out, you got to look it up. The pictures on those it's these winged whale kind of things. That was a Macquarie concept drawing from Empire, and they just kind of duplicated them into a shirt because they wanted to make kind of like a loud shirt with a lot of stuff on it that looked unusual, and that's what he's wearing at the end. This very loud shirt.
Also at the end when they pan into that jungle planet where that actual pan was reused from the original teaser trailer for Rogue One that was screened at one of the celebrations.
And it's impossible. Yeah. I'm still looking for it. I can't find it.
It's on YouTube, but it's a leaked thing. It's like shot with a camera.
Yeah.
Because they never officially released it.
Now, why wouldn't they do that? The movie's out. The movie's been out.
Basically, that trailer, it's panning up, and then you see the Death
Star.
But obviously, they don't have the Death Star there. And
in the day.
And it's like Obi-Wan quoting the Death Star, basically, is what he's doing. Well, that's the voiceover you hear while it pans up. And you see those little winged creatures, too.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny, because in this movie, it looks like you're in a forest, but it's just some plants next to the tables where they're playing.
Yeah.
So it's
but it's
playing a trick on you.
It's the exact same shot. It's just colored a little bit differently. Like, it's a little brighter.
Another weird thing I've heard is that there's a coffee maker in the Falcon that is exactly the same one, from what I understand, that they used in Alien inside the Nostromo, because they wanted all this futuristic looking hardware for people to use, and he has it in the same manner. And I think they reused it even for Back to the Future. It's part of the flux capacitor.
Yeah, he has a whole little like bar area.
Yeah, there's a lot. I wish that's the thing. I can't wait to start seeing the books, all these books where they're going to show you all the sets, because there's so much modern looking stuff in that Falcon. Yeah. I mean, by the time Lando gets away, that ship is a mess. It's been clobbered. It's leaning forward.
It looks like it's been practically half of it smashed
flat.
Well,
the guns are, first of all, single cannons. Yeah, and one of them is broken. Han will later turn it into quads. The dish that sits just flat on top was also sheared off, like it's been in just about every other film.
Yeah.
So it's in pieces, and very prominent in this film. You have the dice that were a super minor thing in A New Hope. They showed up for a second just as a goof, really. But later, with the more modern films, they kind of reintroduced them, especially in Last Jedi. They reintroduced the dice, and you definitely see them prominently here when he's riding on his land speeder. He's putting the dice there first, and they're his, and I think he gives them to her, and he gives them back to her, something like that during this movie.
And they're also prominently displayed on our mic stands.
Yes, I'm looking at them right now, and they're pretty cool. Heavy looking, and they're golden dice.
Maybe they're loaded dice.
I don't know. Who knows? But I don't know. I get the feeling that overall everybody here at least was pretty happy with it. It's a definite good follow-up to Last Jedi.
I honestly, I like this one better than Rogue One, honestly, in my opinion.
I think I don't know, maybe I'll have to watch it again, but right now I'm sticking with Rogue One as my favorite of the two. This one is not like the bad one. This is just another good one, but Rogue One, the thing I like about Rogue One is the fact that I'm dealing with characters that I don't know their fate. And I don't have any preconceptions of them, and I don't know where they're going. Yeah. They're either all going to die, or maybe some would live. Now, granted, we know they all died. But ironically, in the earlier scripts, it was shot that they didn't all die. But then they changed it because of the whole reshoots that they did.
Yeah.
And the end of Rogue One gave you a massive infusion of geeky, nerdy things that nerds like us want to see.
Yeah.
Darth Vader fighting in the rebel transport.
Not gonna lie though, I was kind of like hoping that like maybe the end would be like Jabba shows up with like in a ship, and Boba Fett just runs in and kills everybody from the Crimson Dawn or something.
You never know.
That's what I was kind of hoping.
That's why I kept saying that it wouldn't surprise me if at the end, instead of Darth Maul, it would have been Jabba, because okay, it ties more to. So, but whatever, that's fine. But what I'm saying is, for Rogue One, they took. It's kind of like saying you take all the Easter eggs we just talked about, and in Rogue One they threw them all in the last 5 minutes. They gave you an overload of Easter eggy kind of, geeky, nerdy stuff right at the end. So I do like that, the structure of that. Now, granted, once we see this film a couple more times and go over it with a fine-tooth comb like we end up doing, looking at the art of books and the visual dictionaries, reading the novel and just getting more, mining for more data, you never know. It might move up a notch. But definitely better than Last Jedi, as far as I'm concerned. Unfortunately, now we have to wait a year and a half, I think it is.
Yeah, because Episode 9 comes out in December.
And I'm not sure where they're going next with the single film. Is it Boba Fett or is it Obi-Wan? Because
it's one of those two.
Even though we've been hearing definite signs that they're doing these two films, I have not yet seen official Lucasfilm, emails or announcements that say this is the name, this is what we're doing, and this is what it's going to be. Period.
Based on like the news that's been coming out from just like these other sources, because Lucasfilm hasn't really concretely said anything.
That's what I'm saying.
It's only been the Hollywood Reporter, that's been doing
which
this
is
stuff.
Granted, the Hollywood Reporter is not like It's not like Bob's podcast or GeekFest Rants saying, rumor has it that blah, blah, blah. Who cares what rumor has it?
Generally
Hollywood Reporter is like saying the New York Times is alleging that, for Hollywood.
But yeah, it sounds like Boba Fett is in further along production just because they have the director and they have Simon Kinberg as the writer.
Right.
And Obi-Wan, we don't know anything other than the fact that they wanted to start production next year.
Right. And obviously, Ewan McGregor has been making the rounds because he keeps saying, hey, I'll do it if you want me. And he keeps showing up at premieres and stuff.
Yeah, I want him to do it.
I would hope.
I would be disappointed if they didn't have...
No, he has to because he can do it. We're familiar with his face.
I'm looking forward to Obi-Wan much more than I'm looking forward to Boba Fett.
And in these films, like I said before, here's where you can take people with multiple contracts, like a Han Solo, like Jyn Erso, and throw them in, not as the stars, but give them a third of the movie or a quarter of the movie where they have to somehow in the story interact with your lead story characters.
Yeah.
So there is plenty. Plus we have the animated show now and the live action show now. So there's a lot of stuff coming down the pike. So
quickly, what did you appreciate most, the single most thing that you appreciated with Solo?
I really did appreciate the way that they executed Lando. But Darth Maul really, that was nuts. Because that just, for me, that just gives me this idea that, okay, if they could put Darth Maul in here like this, they could throw Rex into a movie at some point. They could they could definitely throw Ahsoka in there. If they could do this with Maul, they could do Ahsoka very easily.
Especially Disney. I mean, granted, Disney is more concerned about marketing and revenue and reaching as many people as humanly possible in terms of diversity. They will want the character that the little kids they just lost. If there's a chance to bring that character back in a movie, I can guarantee they're going to do it.
Yeah.
I appreciated the fact that Solo was well thought out, or at least came off as if it was really well thought out, which is what concerns me about the trilogy movies. Because even though I did love Force Awakens, I didn't dislike The Last Jedi as much as you. There I have a lot of problems with it.
Me too.
But my biggest problem overall is that they just seem to be handing the whole package over to the directors to make all these choices. And my question keeps being, where's the story team?
Well, keep in mind,
why aren't they saying this is what happens?
Keep in mind that even though they do hand over to these directors, and sometimes to me it seems like it's insane, there have been times now where they pull them away from the directors.
Right.
Solo lost it. Yeah. Colin, what was that guy?
Colin Trevorrow,
he lost
episode 9.
He was supposed to do 9. He's out the window. So they pulled them back when they thought they haven't had it. But with that said, how could Last Jedi take place if you have those safety nets?
Here's the difference I've noticed between Last Jedi and Han Solo is the script. Last Jedi, they wrote that script within a year, but with with
but
Han
they
Solo.
also said here, take this script, do whatever you want.
Yeah,
that's the problem.
You can't do that.
You have a story team.
You
for
need
a
some
reason.
focus.
Yeah.
I trust Pablo Hidalgo, but I don't know what the heck. Where was he in all of this?
Or maybe that's the problem.
Maybe he wasn't.
Maybe it was their
know.
fault. I don't know.
But like with Solo, Lawrence Kasdan's been writing this movie like before the Disney purchase. Lucas had him start working on one. He said, I think it was just for kicks, but he's been working on this movie since like 2009 or something.
There's just a very careful balance to keep between gaining new fans, keeping the fans who are just like, I just enjoy this, and keeping the hardcore fans. I mean, it's a big job to keep all those people satisfied, and I can appreciate that.
And Rogue One was the same deal too,
but
with like script writing. He was writing.
John Knoll started it.
John Knoll pitched it like the second
and
right
then
after
they gave
the Disney
it to
purchase.
an actual. Then they gave it to a writer to polish it up, and then they got script writers to do the scripts. But even that at the end, remember, Rogue One had a different ending, and that's why the trailers look different, and that's why in the version we got, everybody dies, and then there was another version where not everybody died.
Well, if it means pumping these movies out a little slower, I can live with that.
I think they should just
get the stories down, nail them down. Solo looked like they had a plan to keep everybody happy.
Well, that's one of the things I read was that the
were.
script is really not that different. It was the direction that changed.
Right.
Like I mentioned before, less ad-libbing, stick to the script.
The details were in there, and they were details that made the story work. They were details that made the characters work, and they were details that kept the hardcore fans happy.
And I'll say it again: if you want to experiment with tone, do it on standalones. Don't experiment with tone midway through a trilogy because it derails it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I guess overall we're pretty happy here. I don't think I'm going to have to do 3 shows about getting everybody's different opinions here because I even think the overall opinion is this isn't split in half like it was with I'm not talking about just us. I'm talking about in general. People seem to be enjoying this film in a positive note.
Interesting too. I've noticed with like all the different like cinema scores and the Rotten Tomatoes stuff. Rotten Tomatoes, the audience score for Rotten Tomatoes is like a 50%. But it's because half the people on there that actually rated it didn't actually watch it, and they said it in the comments too. But the cinema score, they take it from people that actually watched the movie as they're leaving the theater. A-. That's very good.
Not bad.
They said it was because due to the that they heard that Lando was a pansexual character.
Yeah,
and
just
right?
the robot too.
Yeah.
They had a problem with the robot because like it's social justice and all.
Well, yeah, too many references to social justice.
But you know what? There's no point in even delving into that because it's why reward it with conversation. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. And
watch the movie.
They're basically sabotaging. Part of the reason I think they're losing money is because people are sabotaging these movies without even seeing it.
Well, that's happened a lot in the past.
I mean, I think part of the reason why Solo isn't making as much money right now is because it's in May and we literally had Avengers, then Deadpool, and now this. And they just barely made it to they're barely making it to number 1 this time.
Well, I don't understand why they're now going back to winter.
They should stay in winter.
Because if they were going to stay in winter, was this, I don't know if this was an experiment to bring it to summer like it initially was supposed to be, or is it standalones are summers and trilogies are winters? Is that what they want to do? I have no clue.
If they're going to satisfy us by wrapping up this trilogy in a decent, good way and somehow fixing certain things, then they can take all the time they like, according to me.
Oh, yeah. And they have a year and a half now because this is going to be like the longest stretch.
We're not going to get it until December of 2019. Yes, we have a year and a half.
Yeah. Wow.
That year and a half to that, a year and a half till Galaxy's Edge at Disney World.
Yeah, that's all going to be hitting around the same time.
How are we going to stand it?
So definitely lots of Star Wars content down the line for us, and we are going to continue with other Star Wars subjects, and I will obviously be exploring this a little deeper, in different aspects, obviously with the merchandising and the books and all that stuff that's coming, right around the corner. All right, I hope you guys enjoy today's show. We did basically an entire show just on Solo alone. No pun intended, Solo alone. We try to go at this film in as many different directions as we can. We dug through all the different interesting aspects of the movie. And even though we are not going to have the crazy repetitive examination of other people's feelings on it as we did with the last film, we will return to this topic in other manners, I'm sure, in the near future. Plus, we have other topics coming up that we are just dying to put out there. So on behalf of everyone here, including my wife Kim and son Kyle, who contributed to today's show, thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon here at GeekFest Rants. Bye-bye, everybody.
How'd you guys let me beat you on that one? Come on. There's no liars in this game. Just players.
The seat taken?
Nobody's in the seat that I ain't taking from.
So this is, Sabak?
Sabak.
Sabak. Got it.
You played before?
A couple times, yeah.
Captain Lando Calrissian.
Han Solo.
Looks like you're having a good day.
I'm a lucky guy.
Can I ask you a question, Captain Calrissian?
Anything, Han?
It's Han, but that's okay. I heard a story about you. I was wondering if it's true.
Everything you've heard about me is true.
If you would like to subscribe to our show, send us messages, or see video links to some of the topics we talked about today, please visit our homepage at geekfestrants.com or our YouTube channel, Facebook page, or iTunes at GeekFest Rants.
I don't know what we're yelling about!
GeekFest Rants is produced by Carlos Perone, copyright 2018.
This broadcast is part of the IC Robots Radio Network. Visit icrobots.com for this and many other nerd/nostalgia related podcasts. You won't be sorry for long.